Do you believe in magic? I do. And no, I'm not referring to sleight of hand card tricks or special illusions utilizing smoke and mirrors. I'm talking about real magic. The kind you read about in fantasy novels or perform yourselves in video games. When I was younger, my friends and I would compete with one another to see who could scare each other the most. Of course, it all started with ghost stories, monsters, and other creatures of the night lying in wait to steal us away, or worse. Those stories did work for a time, but like all things, time slowly quelled the fear in us as we matured. It wasn't until our preteens that a rumor started to circulate around our town regarding a woman who lived a few blocks away from us. Apparently, my friend had heard the story from one of his friends who actually witnessed something strange at the woman's house. One day, in mid-October, the witness had been walking home from school when he saw a bright flash coming from the old woman's house. Her house was a modest home. Not too large, not too small. It wasn't overly fancy, and it didn't appear to be a creepy dwelling long neglected. Anyway, he saw a flash of light. After a few minutes, the boy walked up to the house and used a small pot to stand on to peek through the window. What he saw, or so he claims, is that the woman was standing over a table with what looked to be a body on top of it, though it was difficult to see due to the darkness of the room, and the body was completely covered in a dark sheet. He said that she raised a hand to the sky, and in a split second, her entire hand engulfed in flames. She pressed her hand onto the sheet, and the fire seemed to pour from her hand onto the body. In seconds, the body was an inferno on the table. Then, the woman looked up and saw the boy. This caused him to scream and lose his footing. He fell to the ground, scrambled to his feet, and narrowly made it away from the house. A day later, that boy was never heard from again. Just kidding. He was fine, but his family did end up moving away a few months later. His dad had gotten a new job and had to relocate the entire family. Or so I was told. So that's how the legend of our own local witch started. Now, of course, nobody believed the story at all. But everyone, whether it was subconscious or not, avoided going near her home whenever possible. Kids would cross the street beforehand just to avoid being in front of the house, lest they be grabbed and burned alive. Even the mailman didn't like going up to the house. He said something about it giving him the creeps. I thought it was funny to hear a grown-up say those words at the time. Made me feel courageous. The reason I know this was because I was walking home from school and I passed by that house every day. I just happened to be walking by the mailman who was standing at the base of her walkway that led up to her door. I said good afternoon to him, to which he smiled and called me back. He asked me if I wanted to make $5. I asked him what he wanted, silently preparing myself to sprint away from him. It was only about a block and a half away from my own house. I bet I could have made it home before he grabbed me. I was one of the fastest kids in school after all. He said all I had to do was take this stack of mail up to the house and put it in the mailbox. I eyed the man who seemed to be sweating from his brow. My intrepid mind fired back. Make it 10 and you got yourself a deal. The mailman agreed, so I took the cash, the stack of mail, and made my way up the path to her door. As I slid the mail into her mailbox, her door opened. This made my previously fearless heart plummet. She opened the door and I couldn't move my feet. It felt like they weighed a ton. She appeared to be a middle-aged woman with few wrinkles and long, vibrant red hair. She asked me what I was doing, and even though I couldn't move, I still managed to speak. I told her I was just delivering her mail. She returned a sly smile, asking me if I was a little too young to be a mailman. My nervous brain returned with, "I'm probably gonna retire in a couple of years." She laughed and I nervously chuckled at it, and I felt the weight in my legs begin to wane. She thanked me and introduced herself. She said her name was Rose, and I gave her my name. I then told her that I had better get home before it got too late, and she gave me another smile. Just before I stepped off her front porch, I paused and turned back. I'm not sure what compelled me to ask her this, but my curiosity was screaming. "Are you a witch?" I asked with a slightly less confident voice. Without missing a beat, she said, "Yes, and you better be good or I'll cast a spell on you." I could tell she was being sarcastic, but it felt almost too on the nose to be a joke to me. Anyways, I headed home, and that was the last time I thought about Rose the Witch for many years. Fast forward to now. I'm working a steady job and I now live in my parents' old house after they retired to North Carolina. Hardly anything has happened in the time in between. I finished school and college, I had a few girlfriends, and I've had a few heartbreaks. Basically, life went on for the most part. It wasn't until about a month ago that strange things started to happen in my town. It began with disappearances. Regular people whom I've known most of my life, just up and vanished. Police thought they were just moving away as time went by. But at the beginning of October, 12 people vanished all at once. The town was in a state of panic. The next thing to start happening was rolling blackouts. Our entire town would lose complete power, regularly. It was annoying at first. Then it became scary, as the power company gave a statement saying they could not find any cause to the power loss at all. Every time they would check on the power status, their readouts would say everything was fine. Except it wasn't. There were no lights, no TV, no radio, nothing. The last strange thing that started happening were the strange people I began to see standing around outside. I would only be able to see them from inside of my house through the windows. People just standing rigid in random places outside. I thought they were all doing some strange viral video challenge thing, but when I opened my front door to ask what they were doing, they were all gone. People have reported seeing similar sightings, but the local police could find no traces of anyone standing outside of their homes. I'm not sure why, but these incidents made me think of Rose and the stories people used to say about her. Yesterday, I went over to see her. I had never seen her move away from home and was still listed in the phone book, so I paid her a visit. I walked up to her front door and rang the doorbell. After a moment without answer, I knocked. After another few minutes of waiting, I attempted the doorknob and was stunned to find that her door was unlocked. I pushed the door inward and called out to her. No reply. As I walked around inside her home, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. There were no cauldrons, no tomes, no hex incantations. Not that I would have known what those looked like anyways. My point is, there was no indication that she was actually a witch. Just as I was getting ready to leave, I heard a knock coming from the door inside her house. I walked over to it and asked if Rose was there. The knocking continued. I steadied myself and opened the door. Suddenly, something crashed through the door and grabbed a hold of me. It looked like a person, but their face was horribly disfigured, almost like a zombie. They were shrieking loudly in my face. Their breath smelled awful. It slammed me against the wall so hard I felt my spine creak under the impact. Then, I heard a cacophony of different words being said from down the hallway. In a brilliant flash, this thing was turned into a walking hellfire. It crumbled to ash in front of me as the fire slowly dissipated. Catching my breath, I looked up to see Rose, now much, much older than she used to be, gripping a cane tightly in one hand, and smoke rising from the other. She walked over to me and told me that I needed to leave immediately. Still stunned at what I just witnessed, I barely could process her words. She was telling the truth. She was a witch. A real-life magical witch. She snapped a finger in my face and I refocused on her. She repeated herself, and I could still only focus on what I had just witnessed. I said aloud, "You're really a witch." The concerned look on her withered face turned to pity, and she simply said, "Not anymore." She told me that I needed to leave the town immediately and to never come back. I asked why, and she said it's no longer safe. She said that there were dark things in this world, things that prey upon the weak and the helpless. She followed a trail of those dark things to this town and settled in. She had been protecting this town ever since. But now she's grown too old and too weak to hold them back anymore. If I hadn't experienced what I just did, I would have called her insane. But I nodded to her, showing her that I understood exactly what she was telling me. Just before I left her house, I turned back to the old woman once more and said, "Thank you for protecting us." She returned that sly smile she had given me all those years ago when I was a boy, and I left. Just as I was getting ready to hit the road, I paid Rose one last visit. Though when I arrived, her door was open and her house was completely empty. It looked as if no one had lived there in years. I'm not 100% sure what I believe, but I know what I saw. I saw a monster attack me. I felt its breath on my face. My back still aches thinking about it. I watched Rose burn the creature to ash with only her bare hand. Witch or not, she saved my life. She saved all of our lives, for as long as she could. And I'm grateful. Although, after I moved back in with my parents in North Carolina, something strange has happened regarding my old town. Whenever I try to call someone who still lives there, I get nothing but busy signals. And when I ask my parents about it, they adamantly tell me that we've always lived in this city, my entire life. I don't know what happened to my town, or to Rose, or why I seem to be the only person who remembers it. But if people start disappearing in your town, or you experience blackouts, or start to see people standing outside your houses at night, leave. Leave now, before you all become forgotten as well.